What is up, folks? It's the Emulsion podcast, hosted by chef and media producer Justin Khanna. That's me. The Emulsion is a result of my desire to educate, share, and personally keep myself up to date on stories stirring up the restaurant industry. I also sit down and interview remarkable professionals that are making exciting moves in their own unique and creative ways. Fine dining, chef swaps, new gear, critiques, professional performance, balance, hospitality, as well as the occasional rabbit hole are all just a few of the topics we get into here. With the goal, of course, being that you take off your headphones or get out of your car feeling smarter, more inspired, or more connected than when you pressed play. Whereas the long ad read, you will not find that here because the growing gang of amazing folks on Patreon make it possible for me to hit the publish button every single Thursday, and I'm eternally grateful for their support. But more on that after the show. This very special on-the-road episode of the Emulsion podcast is sponsored by Capital One's Purpose Project. Hey there, I am back in town. How is it going? It is so great to have you here. This episode was super fun. I had the sincere pleasure of interviewing one of my best friends in the world, John Miller. As most of you know, we were on a road trip for about a week, moving him from New York City all the way here to Seattle. We passed through a plethora of cities, and I took a wide stretch of the road in the mountain time zone to kind of mount my camera to the dashboard, put a mic in the pocket of his sweater, and ask him questions all about travel. We get into his experience working at restaurants like Single Thread, working with me in Norway when he was the restaurant manager and I was executive sous chef, what you should do when you feel intimidated by a wine list because he has a ton of somm experience, and then his thoughtful plan to take on a new city when you're traveling. I've got a very special ask for you at the end of the interview too, so make sure you stick through all the way to the end. Please enjoy our conversation. If nothing else, this is actually reaffirming how mobile my podcast setup is. Because this is like full production mode in the middle of Colorado. How far away until we hit Utah?
We are 426 miles away from Utah.
From Utah or Salt Lake City?
Sorry, Salt Lake City.
Okay, perfect.
I mean, that's pretty much Utah. We have to go through Wyoming.
Oh, really? We touched Wyoming?
I think we're in Wyoming right now, actually. Or
okay.
We're like 10 miles away from the border.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so basically our day started this morning with a really early wake up, 5 a.m. wake up, and I did 6 hours to get us through Kansas for the most part. Then we blasted through Colorado, which was actually a little uneventful, unfortunately. Yeah. And I pulled for a bunch of questions. This is actually really nice, yeah. This only applies to the video people that are watching. But yeah, I want to make this all about travel because we've traveled quite a bit, and that is kind of like the purpose of this trip, and so much of it is professionally based for you. And so I guess my first question comes as far as how does this road trip compare to some of the other cross-country ones you've done?
This one's been a lot of fun. The last two, I've done it twice, one from Minnesota to Napa, California.
Oh, that's right.
Back in 2012, and that's been a mad sprint.
You were alone?
I was with both the last times I was with my older brother who graciously helped me take these trips.
Yeah.
And that was 2012.
Uh-huh.
And the last one was 2016, and that was from Richmond, Virginia to Sonoma County, California as well.
And you were solo?
I was solo until Omaha. So about halfway through the country, 2 days of solo driving. And then again, my brother came down, he lives in South Dakota. Easy sort of trek from Omaha to South Dakota, and helped me drive the rest of the way through California. Just because, I mean, those trips, like 19 hours in a car by yourself is insane.
Brutal.
I've done it once. I've done 12 hours from Napa, California to Portland, Oregon by myself, and it's a lot of time by yourself. It's a little crazy. So I guess the question is, why do you continue to go back to the road trip? Why not ship it or fly it or hire movers or whatever? For me, I mean, the last move I did, and I move around every 2 years, it seems like,
yeah,
was actually from Sonoma County to New York City, and I shipped my stuff and flew out there because it was February. I mean, same time. and I was actually planning on doing the trip, but I sort of had the funds to ship my stuff, and it was fine. To me, the trips are a lot of, like, it's decompressing in a way. It's
Totally.
It's getting back to, the time by yourself, time with somebody, to just recollect, reevaluate. These trips have always been between sort of life events, usually based around careers and such big moves, that it's always good to kind of, it's some
Gives you a
incredible
buffer.
Yeah, it's a buffer and some time to reflect. And like right now, where you're looking out at,
This is crazy where we're going through right now.
Unbelievable.
I'm like a little upset that I'm not
so
vlogging this.
Beautiful.
There's like beautiful stacked rocks on one side. There's snow on the other. Oh, it literally says point of interest right there.
We're on the Colorado-Utah border.
Uh-huh.
The rock, like, going through a very low patch of the Rockies on one side, huge snow-capped mountains, and then kind of the more red earth, dusty hills on the other side. It's so gorgeous. And after so many hours of Kansas and Illinois and Indiana and Kentucky, it's a nice break
100%.
to get back into.
And
for sure.
So, I mean, I didn't want to ask that question as a way to, like, insult anything, because I've never done this trip. And part of that is because, like, I've never had a good excuse to go cross-country road tripping. Because I'm always like, well, I should just ship it. But yeah, this is freaking awesome, and I'm super glad we did it. But one question that I was thinking of as I was trying to think of questions for you is, would you be a traveling American businessman? Like, 250 days on the road, hotel room to hotel room. Does that interest you in any capacity?
Yeah.
Really?
I came very close to it a couple times with positions, and maybe not like American, but I mean, the thought of traveling, working with wine and working as a wine importer, and I've done that with friends in Norway. A group called Nondos, got to spend a couple weekends and weeks with them, where they've gone, like, pack up a van through and travel through France, and to me it's, it is a lot of time, but I've also, it like, depends on where I am in my life right now. I'd love just kind of traveling and moving.
The nomad life.
The nomad life.
Yeah.
The slight vagabond.
Yeah. That's, I mean, I was there too. Like, that's why we both moved internationally, I know.
Yeah. I mean, the time we spent in Norway, Bergen was our base.
Totally.
Like, it was a great place to come home to.
Right.
And work when we had to work. But if you had a long weekend, if you had a week or any more than 2 days to spare, usually out of the country.
Yeah.
Or in the country, but not in the city.
Correct. And I mean, that was, I talk about the fact that was one of the biggest reasons I stayed in Norway, because they gave us 5 weeks paid vacation.
And then some.
And then some, yeah, correct. And it was like encouraged to travel, which I feel like is a little bit, why do you feel like that's so I mean, aside from like the labor laws that are in place and like the amount of time you legally have to give your employees, like, I was so much more inspired to come to work knowing that, like, in 2 months I'm going to Hong Kong, or like in, last week I just went to Copenhagen, so now I'm stoked to be back at work.
I mean, I don't know the reasons behind, restaurant. I think here the labor is so, I mean, I think one end labor can be really inexpensive.
Right.
And so it does, like, places in Norway are really pushing for 3-4 day weeks.
Yeah.
As restaurants, which is a little crazy to think about, but one of the contributing factors is the labor is expensive, so you can't keep people around so many times. We're entering Wyoming right now.
Here we are.
Very cool.
This is really live, people. We're really live.
And the labor here is so inexpensive that employers aren't, like, there's not, like,
you're not investing. Like, it's not an investment.
Yeah. And you see that, like, Maemo was one of the first restaurants in the world really to say, like, hey, we're going to have a 4-day week for our chefs.
Right.
And they're going to do those 4 days, and then they're going to have 3 full days off, and they're like explore the country, explore whatever. They're going to come back, and as Ben talks about how like I have the most creative, inspiring team, because you like, I think you see, especially in the United States, so many like cooks and that who are on the verge of being burnt out, because it is so much work. And I think that on the flip side, when you travel, you become so inspired. It may not like where we are right now. I mean, we've crossed some very, the flyover states.
Yep.
But that still creates creativity. I mean, we're not, except for like last night seeing Kansas City and the food scene in Kansas City.
Right.
And some of the best food I've ever had.
It's true. It's actually true.
In a place that I wouldn't have expected to be, or would. Not saying anything bad about Kansas City, but there's so much out here that you can see and just come take away from.
I think that's also a good point that I didn't see myself coming to terms with. Is like, am I going to get bored on this drive? But what you realize is that it's actually like the moments of like not constant stimulation, right? Because I feel like travel can sometimes get pitched, especially when it's rushed, as like this constant, like you're on, or you're like, you got to go from this to this to this. And to have like a breather can sometimes, especially like if you're taking a break from, are those deer?
Yeah.
Those are deer.
Antelope.
An antelope, dear God.
Yeah.
So having that literal break of like, because sometimes people rush it, right? Especially like, I remember when we were working at restaurants where you would get 2 weeks vacation, is like you go from the biggest push, the big clean down, and then you go right into vacation, and it's like there's no buffer.
And you're spending like, I have 2 weeks off, I'm going to hit these 5 cities.
And it's not even relaxing.
Yeah, and you don't like relaxation is so much a part of it. And I know there's so many, places, and I see a lot of, creative driven people who go to the middle of nowhere and just like stay there.
Right.
And then like, yeah, you have cities like Tokyo or Seoul or, Mumbai.
Sure.
That are going to like be so stimulating on one end, but I think you also need the other end of a breather.
Yep.
You need to go to Kyoto or Hokkaido.
Yep.
In that trip and take in the downside, the not the downside, but the
less
stimulating,
shiny, the less shiny parts.
The breather of it. Like right now is such a breather.
Such a breather. My ears are popping right now. It's crazy. I don't even know what elevation we're at, but we're in it. Yeah, we're in it. And thank goodness there's no snow right now. I'm just crossing my fingers we don't get to that. So what I wanted to lead into next was, how do we foster that in like American restaurants? Like, do you have to see it as a chef? Like, do you have to go work in a place that gives 5 weeks paid vacation? Like,
I think you have to. I think it comes from investing in employees.
Totally.
And I've seen a few restaurants where the chefs are like, they advocate for that. If you say, I want to take a week and go to Japan, they're like, I will call every name in my book to make sure your trip is exactly the way you want it to be.
Sure.
So that when you come and you are thankful for that, and you come back to that chef inspired, and I think that rather than, I've seen also chefs that are the opposite, where it's like, like you're going to take a week off, like I need you for this week, when you have to understand the life. Look at all those antelope.
That is crazy.
That's awesome.
It's so why? Like, why are there antelope? Anybody in the comments that knows why, it's so crazy.
Look at that.
We're like having to pause the interview to just observe what's around us right now. Yeah, for anybody who knows why the hell there's antelope in Wyoming, comment at us. Let us know. So, and I totally agree that sometimes the reason that as a cook or as a chef you'll have this inclination to want to leave is just because it's not because you don't enjoy your job. It's not because you don't enjoy the restaurant. It's just because you're like, you need a little hit of inspiration.
Yeah,
like,
you need a change of scenery.
Totally.
And the best restaurants are the ones that inspire you who are willing to give you the time off to go and know that you're going to come back. And that's, I think I won't even call it a risk. That's just investing. Like, if you're insecure about your cooks not coming back, then there's deeper issues. But if you're pushing people to want to explore and want to travel, like that is the most important thing in this industry, is to like Ferdinand Point said it, like, eat everything, read everything, see everything, and in the end you'll know just a little bit. Like,
right.
There's so much in this world,
totally,
that it's crazy that you wouldn't want to go out and explore it and to drive through Wyoming in the middle of February.
It is February,
and and find that exciting.
It's true, and I mean, I get a little bit ashamed when, like, I grew up in the U.S. and there's, like, so many places that I haven't been yet, and I kind of, like, I gravitate towards the Europes and the Asian countries, and there's so much here that, like,
it is hard, and I think there's now a lot more places you want to visit in those like sectors, and since we're in Wyoming and, like, Montana's near us, there's so much hunt. Like Big Sky.
Yep.
And there's this whole new breed of chefs out there who are hunting and foraging in these, vast spans of land that there used to be nothing, and they're creating this culture and reverting to a culture that has always been there, but it's now just getting attention to. And you see that, I think, all over the country. If you look at, small places like Blackberry Farm.
Yep.
In Little Washington, Willow's Inn in Loomy Island,
right?
And I think places, while it's a little uppity, but, like, look at Relais Chateau,
totally,
throughout the United States, and you're going to find some incredible properties, and those are going to be more reliable than if you're flipping through the Michelin Guide, because you got to get out of the city.
Yeah, like all these places are outside of, like, the big metropolitan areas for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a really important thing, is that, like, this was not necessarily a foodie trip. Like, yes, we're hitting up a couple places, but, like, we're not stopping in Denver. We're not stopping in Salt Lake City, really. We're staying overnight, but it's not like we have dinner reservations planned. And I think that's something that I need to be a little bit better at personally, is, like, taking the time to enjoy a trip for things other than the food sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I'm really good at, like, planning the restaurant tours and going on those, like, longer excursions to kind of, like, bounce around Paris or bounce around New York. And I guess that's part of the reason why, like, where are we going to eat out here?
We're going to hunt it ourselves.
But I need to, like, allow myself to be inspired. I think that's, like, the most important thing. Because, again, it's, like, sometimes that lack of stimulation. It's those, like, standing in the shower moments, right? Like, sometimes you have your best moments when you're, like, not being overly stimulated. I think that's important. So where do I want to go next? I wanted to chat a little bit about you touring around in a band, because that also, like, totally influenced probably, like, the nomadic thing in your life, where you're, like, you feel comfortable on the road, you feel comfortable, like, being able to bounce around and work. And so can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time, even before all that, like, growing up, my family traveled a lot, even just living in different places, Mississippi, Germany,
Europe,
and
right?
South Dakota.
Yep.
But even in those, like, every sorry.
No, you're
pass
fine.
This guy.
Yep. This is what happens with the live podcast, folks.
Oh boy.
We gotta make it there before this interview can get published. You want to buy some fireworks? Oh dear. Okay. Carry on. So, yeah, growing up,
we traveled a lot. Like every family vacation was more than likely motorhome, or
really?
pack the Thule box on top of the SUV van and go camping. Go to these places. I spent so much time in the Badlands, time in, like, Moab, time in Texas and Santa Fe and all across the country, and we would do like a couple times a year drive from South Dakota to Chicago in one day, so a 12-hour day of driving. And I think that just made me used to this kind of travel, especially this long day travel, being okay with being in a car for 16 hours or in a train for 12 hours and not necessarily being jonesing for like, I need to take a plane and I need to get there in an hour and a half. But being able to appreciate also the fact that, like, I mean, the views and the drive and the journey itself, you know, and I spent time, like, all that time growing up, and then when I was, you know, last couple of years in high school, first couple of years outside high school, I spent a lot of time touring in different rock bands, and that was another way of fulfilling one dream of being a musician, but also on the other hand, like, just spending a lot of time in cars, a lot of time like sleeping on couches, like living like that nomad lifestyle, like living in a car for a while, and being okay with that, just because it was comfortable, and it's something I love to do, is just travel and especially kind of longer drives. I've always found myself kind of gearing towards that, and in that exploration kind of sense, like, I don't necessarily plan out, you know, I'll plan out like, I want to hit these 3 places, but I also want to give myself just as much, if not more, time of just getting lost. Not necessarily driving, but if we end up in a city that I don't know, I think it's so important to find a district, find a neighborhood that interests you, and just, you know, on foot, like, walk around, explore.
That was us in Kansas City yesterday.
That was exactly us in Kansas City, and you know, when you hit a new city, it's so much fun. Like, before Kansas City, the last one was really Dallas, and I was there for a wine event and had a lot of off time, where it was just like, in July, let's go walk around this neighborhood that's super famous for, you know, the nightlife, and just getting lost, and versus trying to trek out, like, oh, I got to hit up these 5-6 places, and, you know, I knew people on that same trip who had their schedule so tight, and I think it's, for me at least, more enjoyable to, you know, end up at a pizza shop and that you never heard at, in a cool neighborhood, and just, like, that's where you get a true sense of the time and place of these destinations.
I think that also speaks to your personality, though, right? Because you're the kind of person who will, like, at least from how I know you, will, like, strike up a conversation with the bartender, or, like, the table next to you, you'll start chatting with them, and then, like, that will lead to you meeting them up for a, I don't know, like, a foraging trip the next day. You know what I mean? Because they happen to be, I don't know,
part of it, and part of the city, and you feel that too. If I'm in a city that I know really well, and somebody asks me, oh, like, I'm here visiting, and especially the restaurants I'm working at, and we get people visiting from out of country, out of state, out of anywhere, and they, like, I want to give them the best experience in our city.
Totally.
And give them the spots that necessarily they wouldn't find in a guide, or they'd see it and brush it over, and have those true beautiful areas that, you know, or those awesome restaurants that you wouldn't know. And I not expect, but I get that, because that's happened to me so many times of, like, talking to the locals and learning about the city,
I think,
the country, the town.
Do you ever get frustrated with, like, traveling with certain people? I mean, you're obviously not going to go with someone who, like, wants to be super itineraried out for but, like, that's the classic statement, right? Is, like, you learn the most about someone by traveling with them.
Absolutely.
And I get super frustrated when there's people who are like, I don't know, like, or no, I don't want to look at that website. I want to go on a tour, right? Like the super cookie cutter way.
The cookie cutter way, or the people who just don't want to, like, I've had some experiences recently, and like, just a handful of times, very luckily, where people just want to stick to the well-known areas,
Right.
and the Times Squares of different cities. And there's I was recently in London, and I was with my best friend in the world who is not in the industry and doesn't likes food, but it's not the same priority as I have it in my life, as you have it in your life, and the people who are on the same level. And
Totally.
And there were times where I want to go explore Hackney and Shoreditch and these super slightly these very interesting neighborhoods. And there were times where I was like, no, let's stick to these sort of, very commercialized, Soho in London, and it, to me, it's just break away and go to these, and that's where I would get frustrated with traveling with someone where they don't want to, step outside the comfort zone.
Sure.
And that, to me, is so important to truly get to know. The first trip I ever had to Paris was with somebody who was a little bit in shell shock with being outside, being actually pretty far away from the city center, the tourist areas. And my whole time I was just I'd go it alone rather than go to the same cookie cutter Times Square. Then I'd rather just put earphones in and walk 12 miles around and just down streets, down alleys, see what the city's really like than the posh shaped areas of a town.
Well, because when you do that, you kind of remove a little bit of spontaneity too, right? Because you're less likely to run into that person at the weird bar.
Yeah, you're going to the places that are crafted towards people. In my mind, they're crafted towards people who don't want to explore. They want to see the same. That is total comfort zone. They want to go to a area that has familiarity to them, and I want to get to an area that has no familiarity. I want to get go to that bistro, third tumbleweed.
So many tumbleweeds.
And that it may not be good. It
Sure.
may
but it's going to result in a story.
It's going to result in a story, and in the end, I'm going to be happier there ordering something I don't know than ever going to a place I recognize.
Totally. So one thing I wrote down, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, is there in 2019 a substitute for traveling? Can you live in the middle of Kansas and develop by reading, or is there this unspoken thing that comes along with traveling and being away from home? Is it actually possible to figure out a way to develop yourself outside of going to these places, because it's so easy to get access to all the photos and all the rest of the, basically people are putting it all out there online?
I think there is an opportunity to do that. There are books, there's Instagram, there is Facebook and Reddit, and all these sort of tools that you can see and explore the world. But I don't think it's ever going to be the substitute for the fact of actually being there. There are places in the world I will never go.
Right.
And
Sure.
never have the chance to go. But a picture isn't gonna, for me personally, the picture will never be enough.
Yeah. And do you think that's because you're not breaking routine? Is it because you're not allowed to interact with the cultural nuances of a place? What is missing from a picture of L'Estrance's tasting menu, right, as opposed to going there? I mean, obviously there's so many things, but if you had to pick a couple that someone who's sitting at home and maybe doesn't have a passport and they're I don't really know why I would want to travel, what is your biggest thing of this is what you're really missing out on by not going to these places?
I mean, you're missing out. It's our world right now, and our generation and our culture are so experience based, and you have these group of people that get to experience the world, and there's now that there. I mean, a word for it. I can't really think of, of people who just put out their lives on Instagram,
Sure.
and that as experiences, and there are people who sit at home and eat that up, and they're completely fine with it, and they feel like they're living vicariously through it. But I think in the end, you're never gonna be there. You're never gonna like experience that. You can see a picture of it, but it's not you doing it. Your feet aren't on the soil. You're not breathing that air. You're not in the moment. A picture is only that, and I would much rather be in the middle of nowhere with these. We talked earlier about like those food bloggers who are right now climbing
that's right,
mountain in southern, like South America, Patagonia, I think. And that's cool to really watch, but like in my head, just because that's how my brain is wired, is like, I want to do that. I don't know if I even could, but I'd rather try.
Sure. Sure.
And I totally understand that there are people who don't want to try, and I think that you're not going to have the same experience.
It's to each their own, for sure.
Absolutely, it is subjective, and I think the people who do it just only hope to inspire people to do the same, because they understand how important it is to. You're gonna know way more, have so much more knowledge if you're traveling the world, or traveling your state, or traveling your area that you can, than if you're stagnant.
I think another big takeaway from me from that is like hearing you talk about the fact that you intentionally build in these unexpected moments. I think what paralyzes a lot of people is because so much of this, what we put out there on the internet, is like so polished that you think that your trip has to be polished.
Exactly.
Right? And so what I'm gaining from that knowledge from you is that it's not going to be perfect, right? No. Like your trip is not going to be perfect, and it should not be perfect. No. So if that is holding somebody back from like booking the ticket or getting on the train or whatever, that's the beauty of it. Like the beauty lies in it's like the wabi-sabi, right? Like the beauty lies in the imperfection. Yeah. And I think I think you have to, when you do travel, you got to do research. I'm not necessarily saying picking out every spot you're going, but read up on the place. Know the general idea so that you're not walking into a trap. Sure. Or you know what you're doing, but you're not like, there's a fine line between buying plane tickets to Bali and just jumping on and showing up and being like, what now? And planning out every minute, having an itinerary set to the T of what you're going to do. There's that area in between where you want to experience things and you want to plan things out, but we said, like having that research about the place so you can make informed decisions about your actions. So this, very much so, of this conversation was a little bit travel for recreation, right? Like travel to be inspired. But you brought up a little bit about having to travel for work, like because you're a som, because you're working in these restaurants that rely on you having knowledge about different areas of the world. That essentially benefits you, as opposed to someone who doesn't. I don't know. Well, who could either do their work from anywhere, or does sit in a cubicle all day, which
or stick to one spot. Correct. So, and I think in this industry, it really, you do have two routes. You can remain, like, you find a company, you love it, you can remain loyal and stay. My traveling has left me with a lot of different bullet points, on a resume. And that doesn't really mean that much to me. Right. Like I'm not doing it so that I have this stellar resume that I'll never have to have a job turn me down, because that will never happen.
Sure.
You know, I do it because I want to learn and push myself, but I think it is so important, because when in my field, like I work as a sommelier, I work in the dining room, I view myself more as a hospitality professional than a singular job, and a lot of that was very intentional with traveling and jumping around in these different positions, in these different parts of the world. You know, learning as a cook here in the United States, on the East Coast, in Chicago, in the West Coast, and getting a basis for that. But also working as a som in Europe, where I can spend a lot of time with vineyards and these classic wine regions, and that, like, trying and working as a som in the Napa Valley, where, you know, those are the areas, especially in the United States, people drink those kind of wines, and I can walk away with more experience and a better breadth of knowledge than I mean, textbooks are hard for me.
Yep,
like,
totally.
Textbooks, I can read about it all day, but if I'm going to learn way more if I have my feet on the ground, the winemaker's 20 yards away, pulling up stones and explaining to me why these stones make up the flavor profile of that specific wine. And to me, it automatically translates to a better experience for the guests that I serve, the guests that I work with, the team that I work with, because it's all about knowledge.
Yeah. And I think just hearing that story, in the same way that you are more like in the same way that you want to, if someone comes to, like, if you're living in South Dakota and someone wants to come to South Dakota, you have this intense passion to want to show them a good time.
Yeah.
I feel like that also translates to, if I'm going to serve you a Côte du Rhône, I want to be able to tell you about why this is special.
Why it's special, and why it also why it works for you.
Yep.
You know, and those, like, to me, like, the wine, every wine is special. Every wine has a story. Like, when you get to the winemakers you want to drink, the wines that are incredible, no matter what the price range is, they all have a story. There's some, like, it's one of the most unique things, like, in the world, one of the most unique agricultural products. Like, imagine if every carrot had a story behind it. It'd be insane. But instead, it's grapes. But at the end of the day, you're not just a farmer. You're kind of an artist, and you have so many different routes to go as a winemaker and farmer to produce that product. And I think there's way more. There's so many stories to be told, and a lot of that comes from the wine. A wine is a place, you know. That's, I mean, especially the French way. Yeah. Like, you're never going to see a Chardonnay. You're going to see Chablis, Mount de Tener. You're going to see Côte du Rhône. You're going to see Sancerre, Bordeaux. Like, those are places, and those places are special, and those wines are special and very specific to a place. Correct.
Can you rant a little bit on what's currently happening with natural wine versus old school wine? Because we've had conversations about it, but I really enjoy your perspective, because you are a som that likes natural wines, and you've had experience building lists in a couple different ways. So to take it off travel for a second and put your som hat on, where's your head at in 2019 with where the natural wine versus old school wine is at, or old world?
I've been really lucky to have two vastly different experiences with wine that really shaped who I am as a sommelier. My first experience running a wine program was in Norway, where natural wine is 20 years more advanced than most places in the world. As soon as those wines were one of the first to hit, natural wine hit, like, Scandinavia, and then Japan, and now, like, US.
Yep. on the coasts, usually
on the coast, like New
right
York,
now.
New York and LA, like LA is just eating it up. And those wines were running a program in Norway, especially coming from an outside world. I had to really learn about those producers really fast, and I got to work with some of the best natural wine importers who brought in some of the best wines in that category and that style. And to me, the while natural wine has no legal definition, it's a stylistic choice for someone growing grapes to be less about who's more about the process of growing the grapes than they are about manipulating the wine.
Sure.
And it's all about how do I not mess this up, but also like show the true expression of the earth, the soil, the terroir, the place, and also just kind of like help it along and not take away stuff, not add stuff to it, but just let it show itself. And I spent years working with that sort of program and learning the kind of wines that their natural wine has a huge hurdle to jump when it comes to the U.S. market, and that it has a lot of characteristics to it that are foreign to the palate of the average wine drinker in the United States, and the concept behind wine. My second experience as a sommelier was working with a very classic wine director, dove into sort of the classics of the wine world, sort of the hits, if you will, and those wines are not like are wines that you don't see every day. You can't drink every day. I've been very lucky with that position to drink and try some of the greatest wines of the world that I will never ever be able to afford or never even want to afford.
Yep.
And I think where my personal opinion is that the wine, no matter how the wine is grown, whether it is a winemaker using techniques they've learned in school to create the perfect wine, or someone who's found the incredible in soil and is just helping it along, great wine will show through. I think there's too much focus right now on, is it a natural wine? Because that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
In the end, like most American winemakers hate that term. Because most of them are just like, I grow biodynamically, I grow organically, I just help but I do winemaking techniques because I can't let my product fail. Right. There's about 5 winemakers in the United States, I think, that are making true French in style natural wine that are cloudy and earthy and funky, and you got to question whether it's safe or not. Right. Safe as in the wine is sound. The wine doesn't have volatile acidity, Brettanomyces. The newest characteristics of mousiness, which is essentially coming from not being fined or filtered or sulfured. It's a living wine.
So how do you detect mousiness?
The last article that I read about it, and it's hard. It's a hard thing to say because it actually affects everyone differently based on the pH acidity of their saliva. Wow. And it's a flaw that you're not gonna necessarily smell it unless it's really bad, but it's definitely going to be on the taste, and it's when after you swallow, when your mouth fills with saliva again, and it interacts with the acidity and of the pH balance of your mouth, you're going to get the aroma of like cheesy bread soaked in milk that's kind of funky, like a mouse, like this kind of like if you ever had like a gerbil, kind of characteristic.
Okay.
And
that makes sense now.
That comes a lot from wines that aren't sulfured, that when you open them, they're exposed to oxygen again, and they start. There's life in that wine,
Yep.
and they start to another bacteria. There's something that starts over gaining ground, if you will, and that also comes with that flavor, and it overtakes the intentional flavors of the wine.
Sure.
And I've even read that there's two winemaker brothers, one who's ultra sensitive to it, and one who can barely detect it, and they make a natural wine that, and there's people who I've met who say, oh, it adds a little characteristic to a wine, and I don't know how I feel about that.
Sure.
But and that's the whole thing, is wine's ultra subjective and personal. My personality is I don't like it in a wine. I feel I'm very subjective to it.
Yep.
But there's also a lot in wine that people sometimes want it because they feel like it makes a genuine natural wine.
Makes it stand out.
It's very interesting right now because you have these clash of two incredibly different cultures. You have the classic master somms who have been trained to the T to detect these flaws and the soundness of wine and what a classic grape tastes like. And then you have these renegade winemakers and somms who are making non-noble varietals or growing grapes where you would never expect, and breaking the rules, so that you get this very unique product. And it's a direct challenge to the old world.
Yeah.
To the old world, the old school style of wine. But a lot of those winemakers who are doing it really well take notes from classic winemakers.
Sure.
Take notes from classic styles, and in the end, a lot of the most famous winemakers biodynamically farm, do little intervention in the cellar, do a touch of sulfuring, but because they have these old school names or ridiculous price tags, a lot of younger generation somms are just pushing them aside or saying that's not what it's supposed to be.
And I think that was one thing I learned from you very early on, is it was probably when you were actually in wine school, is the misconception that the wine pairing that the sommelier throws together is not necessarily the end-all be-all of what goes with the menu.
Absolutely not. They're in the world of wine pairing, the pairing to me and a lot of us winemakers are not necessarily put there as they're put there as an option for guests who don't feel comfortable with the selection and they want a little bit of an easy way to be oh, I'll put it in your hands. And also as an area to explore different wines. And I think there's some restaurants, I think a lot of restaurants sometimes take advantage of that and use it as a high profit margin excuse to charge guests for pretty boring wines and wines that don't necessarily pair, but pairing is so subjective that when you're totally open to things, I still have people who tell me they're so open to wine, and then they'll get a wine and they're like, oh, I don't like this.
Yep.
And the stitch, it's well, it's that's, this is my expression on wine. It's the same way as a chef.
Yep.
And then you have restaurants that genuinely, while they keep the margin, the profit margin in their thought process, but they also want to truly explore an area. And I think when you have a wine pairing that sort of focuses on something specific, a specific wine region, if you're in the middle of Sonoma Valley, you want to drink Sonoma wines or California wines and have a wine pairing dedicated to that, you're going to try some very cool stuff, versus I think some broad wine pairings can lead to some very boring stuff, and that's also my personal opinion, coming from someone who's tasted a lot of wine. I that's being completely subjective.
Sure.
Just because, and that's coming from a sommelier. I don't know any sommeliers who really go for pairings.
Yep.
Just because once you know about bottles, you're more likely. But I think if you go and talk to a som and say, what do you feel like drinking right now? What are you really into? You're gonna find some really cool stuff that they couldn't necessarily put on the pairing per se, that they want to show you.
Yep.
You know, I've had experience like that. They're one of the best wines, technically even a natural wine. Burgundy producer, but they make Gamay, Pinot Noir, and a skin-fermented Chardonnay out of some of the greatest grapes in the world.
Wow.
They started with vines that 2 rows or 4, like that plots of vines in the most expensive vineyards, but their approach to the winemaking is much more like hands-off, much more driven, and they only make a couple thousand bottles a year. Very hard to get, and the sommelier was like, this is skin fermented, this is an orange Chardonnay from grapes coming from some of the best vineyards in Burgundy. It's super cool, and like I think he was also reading his guest a lot, that he knew I would be absolutely down with that.
Yep.
You know, and
well, I was going to ask if there is any value, period, in a guest ordering wine pairing. Because for me, yes, I'm just as down to have any of these wines that you're talking about, but I also see a tasting menu with pairings as a really cool way to taste a lot of different things.
Yes, to taste, to what, like if you're learning and pushing to learn, taste everything. Take everything with a grain of salt, but taste everything. I say that wine pairing it's just not for me. You know, but I've definitely, when I was learning, I definitely did a lot of wine pairings in restaurants, and it got me to where I am today.
Sure. Because it was volume over quality.
It's volume over quality. Like, quality wines are never going to hit wine pairing.
Sure.
Like,
sure.
True, like upper end wines, just you can't afford it unless you're dropping $500 on a wine pairing.
And I think that's a really important point, because we saw at a time in food where tasting menus would get to these ridiculous lengths. I mean, like El Bulli with like 30 plus course tasting menus, and people would write about it where it's like, yes, I had some really great dishes, but I also had 8 courses that I really just didn't enjoy. But I think that's an interesting part about with wine pairings is like, yes, you might have 2 or 3 standouts, but you're also going to have a couple that like maybe you don't enjoy. Yeah. But that's the process. Like that's part of the process.
That's where you learn. And one of the most important, like, wine is so vast. Yeah, it's
correct.
Insane that like even even master sommeliers, not just like I know so many people who will like put a glass in front of anyone, and it's a brand new grape. Yep. And it's a brand new region, and it's a brand new producer, and you're like, I've never had this before. It's amazing. Yep. Or this is, this isn't for me, but I can understand its value. Sure. And that's the world of wine. They're making wine, like right now. They're making a good friend of mine is waiting for his vines in Utah, a little bit south of Salt Lake City, to come of age for him to make Utah wine. Cool. And he's an incredible winemaker, currently pulling fruit out of Mendocino County, California. All interesting varietals. Yeah. Grenache Gris, Riesling, Cortese. It's so cool. Wow. And I can't wait I think he has Riesling planted in Utah. Cool. The wine world is just unraveling, and while if you're studying wine, like I always think you need to study the classics. You can't be a painter without knowing the classics. You can't be a true musician without studying. Like we were listening to a podcast earlier with Travis Barker, like one of the greatest drummers of like our generation, talking about like, I learned how to play classic jazz. I learned how to play rock and roll. I love playing hip hop, and I play in a pop punk band. Like, he became an incredible artist because he was able to study the whole realm. And I think it's so easy right now to get totally trapped in one stylistic set of wines. Like, I know people who will refuse to drink something with sulfur in it, refuse to drink something from a classic wine region, a from like that style. And I also know people on the other hand who won't drink natural skin contact wine, or will like scoff at something from obscure country, you know. And I think, like we said earlier, like you have to have such an open mind to trying everything, that's the great, like just like travel, like you have to be willing to just, you know, go for it.
So that's actually a perfect segue, because I wanted to bring it back to travel for a second. So you spoke a little bit about when you get to a restaurant and you have that conversation with the som, like you personally. Can you give a little bit of tactical information for people listening who, you know, you get to Italy, or you get to France, or you get to London, or you get to Cape Town, South Africa, and you're wanting to try some unique wines that you might not normally get at home? What is that conversation that you have with the som? Because I feel like it's often an intimidating thing to have that big fat wine list in front of you, and to really not know maybe what you're going to order or what you're looking at necessarily. So what are some of like the scripts or the conversations or the one-liners or questions you'll ask?
For sommelier purpose, I think it's, you know, coming from both as a guest and a sommelier, I think it's so important to just like, don't be afraid to be honest and direct.
Yep.
You know, and just and being open with that. Say like, I have $80 on budget. I'm really looking for a white wine. I'm really open to new things. You know, I usually like drinking reductive white burgundies, but I know I want to try something new.
Sure.
And that person knows the wine list better than you will ever know the wine list.
Correct.
And they're gonna take that as a challenge and be excited and be excited with you. You know, I was recently at London and at a restaurant with a group, a 2 Michelin-starred restaurant with a group of diners who were, 2 were some people I knew for a long time, 2 I just met that weekend. None of them had ever been in a Michelin-starred restaurant before, never done a tasting menu before, never even like came to that process. And it was one of those enlightening to come from someone who has this, that is my life, tasting menus, restaurants, getting these experience. It was so insightful to see it from a side of someone like, this is brand new to me.
Right.
We talked to the som, and like we all talked about what kind of wines we were interested in, and what, like, you know, my friend was like, I like big bold red wines, and his wife was like, I like sweet rosés.
Wow.
And like the sommelier is just, or I like sweet white wines, and the sommelier is like, boom, like rosé champagne. Like found this incredible bottle that bridged those 2 ridiculous things.
Wow.
And it was, I always want to put it in their hands and give them sort of parameters.
Yep.
You know, that you want. And if you don't have parameters, like, just talk to them. They're you know, the worst thing you can do is just like, don't ever take out your phone and start Googling producers, or
out of fear, right?
Out of fear
for looking stupid.
I see that so many times in a restaurant. The last one I worked at, the wine list was, I put it in front of experienced sommeliers and say, who are friends, and say, like, recognize 3 of the, like, tell me if you recognize any of these producers, and I'd be like, I know 2 out of the 150 that you have here.
Wow.
You know, and it's, you know, that was just because it was such a very unique list. I'd see guests who rather go through and look at what, like, oh, well, gives it a 4.8 score. That's not very high.
And meanwhile, you're like, I'm like, being paid to do this
like,
job
this
for you.
This is my job. Like, you tell me, oh, you like red wine and you want to spend under $100 and it wants to be kind of like a Bordeaux, but also like a Pinot. Like, I'm going to know the exact, I already have 3 wines I want to show you.
Yeah.
But you want to be, like, standoffish.
Sure.
And I think that's the worst thing you could do.
Right.
You gotta trust the people who work there, and
the professionals,
that
right?
That can take a lot. I've been to restaurants where I've been very skeptical, and
Sure.
and you gotta humble yourself to the level that if you don't know, you gotta ask.
Yeah. Taking it a quick step back, because a lot of people might be hearing like you saying tasting menus are my life, doing like traveling to different regions of the world is amazing, and it's definitely a reason why I got into the industry and why I continue to stay in the industry, is because travel is such a huge part of it. Exploring different cultures and cuisines is such a big part of it. But with a lot of that moving around, that vagabond life, comes joining new teams and new restaurants. And I guess my question for you is, how would you advise someone to get the confidence to start at a new restaurant? Like coming from, I don't know, you're moving to France for the first time, you're going to Spain, and you're like super nervous to join this new restaurant team. I know you're good at it for very specific personality focused reasons, but is there any like tactical, strategical points that you could give to someone starting at a new place that's probably on the higher end of things?
I think it's terrifying.
Yes.
I remember when I was going to Norway and I knew one person at the restaurant and didn't know him that well. I think when we're talking like higher end of restaurants, that world is so small. I think it is important to reach out and ask, like if you're going to that restaurant, try to reach out to a chef, a friend, someone who might have a connection with that restaurant, and ask what it's like, before if you're making the goal, or like kind of get a little, like do a little detective work into the choice you're making, so that you can come. It's like doing research. You can come prepared.
Right.
You can. I mean, when I went to New York City, 19, 20 years old, I was wide-eyed and very naive and had no idea what was going on, and no idea. Kind of knew what to expect, but not really.
Yep.
And that was a very humbling experience for myself to realize I knew nothing.
Yeah.
And I think when you start at a new restaurant, especially as a cook, you gotta bring yourself to the realization that you know nothing.
Yeah.
If you need to learn how they do it, unless someone is asking you how you do it, it doesn't matter.
Empty your cup.
Empty your cup. Like you're gonna learn a brand new way, and you're gonna put that. I think it's more important to put that new technique into your arsenal than it is to be like, oh well, at blah restaurant I did it like that. Like that's gonna immediately like hit red flags for all the cooks with you, and they're gonna be like, oh, like versus like that yes chef mentality is so important. And I watched it. I watched senior level chefs who come into a new restaurant fight for, oh well, I do it like that. It's like it's
unproductive.
It's unproductive, and I think when you do research and you come in humbled and just ready to go and ready to learn, like if you're going to a new restaurant that you don't know about in a new area of the world that you're there to explore, you are ultimately there to learn, and you need to open yourself up to that knowledge, and that requires going in like open-minded.
Right.
Right. That's the most important, and that the more people accept that than ever coming in like what's up.
Sure.
You never do.
There's Fierups Swearnger. I'm not saying that right, even close to correctly. But so I wanted to lead with, he has a question, and it is, what are good steps to setting up a stage that's out of state? And I want to lead with that by you saying that you need to research these places and you need to like get a taste of what you're getting yourself into. So much of a stage is you getting to know them just as much as they're getting to know you, right?
Absolutely.
And that's just such a huge part of it that I don't feel like people really like take into account, as far as like, oh well, I staged at this restaurant, I didn't really like it, but they offered me a job, I have to say yes, right? And it's like, No. Like, you can move on from that. Like, that's part of the interview process. Like, so much. And I feel like chefs would rather have it that way, right? Like, the general manager would rather have you say, this is not a good fit for me, rather than them spending the resources to bring you on, and then 3 months into it, you saying, I'm depressed and I'm burnt out and I need to leave.
Yeah. There's so many restaurants like that were like, I mean, there's so many benefits to just going to a place with the mindset of, I want to learn, and not so much the pressures of, I want to learn and I need a job here. Like, that takes the pressure off you, that takes the pressure off them, and you're more open to learn. If you're setting up a stage for another job, I'd say do it for 2 days.
Got it.
2 days is so important because I've had 1 day restaurant stages where, you know, everything's perfect.
Oh, sure.
And then you get there, you commit, you get there, and you're like, this is not what you showed me.
Yep.
You know, I think with the 2 days, you get a full view, and you can take a day to learn, and then you can take a day to perform.
Right.
You know, and that's important. And I think, you know, you need, like, so many chefs, so many cooks who are looking for stages feel like they need to know somebody on the inside.
Sure.
They, you know, who do you know that can hook me up here? Who do you know? And I've got a lot of stuff. I got most of my stages by info@blankrestaurant.com.
Sure.
You know, and reservations at blank, a restaurant's not gonna, like, you're essentially saying, I want to work for you for free for a couple hours. No restaurant's going to be like, I don't want that. That's crazy.
Labor is the biggest expense.
A restaurant's going to look at that and be like, cool, like, I just got 2 cases of artichokes turned for tomorrow.
Yep.
You know?
Exactly.
And as much as you're going to see the experience of the restaurant, so, you know, going to those, being comfortable to just email, have a solid cover letter, email, and resume format that, you know, can be personalized towards the restaurant, customized a little bit, but you don't have to, like, don't kill yourself writing a 3-page email.
Correct.
With why the restaurant, you know, is so specific and unique. You know, most of the times they just want to hear where you're coming from, why you want to be there, and see that you're coming from, see your CV, and that you're where you're coming from, and to essentially, you know, also assess your skill level. Yep. You know, I know I got accepted to stage for a week at Charlie Trotter's when I was halfway through my culinary school. Yeah. Like, I didn't know anything. Yep. And I walked into probably one of the hardest kitchens you could ever be in, and I'm so happy that I did and learned so much from that. But like, I was shocked for them to say yes. Right.
Cheyenne Give Chain asks, how do you choose where to eat while traveling? I'm going to answer first. Dinner has a guide to the city, especially if it's been updated recently. That's like a really good way for me to, like, at least get a pulse of what's happening. And then I'll look at, like, a couple local blogs sometimes, especially if I'm international. And then I will usually put a shout out. Like, that's one of the best things about building an audience, is being able to say, like, hey, I'm going to be in LA. What's good? It's my first time. What do I do? And getting recommendations like that is the best, because it's that local recommendation thing. Oh, yeah. But I don't know. Do you have any alternatives? How do you decide where to go eat?
I think I do, like, thinking, especially like the past year of living in New York, which is like, there's so many restaurants in New York, and there's like 10 new a day. Yep. And they're all amazing. That, like, my first is actually, I'll look at another blog and I'll cross-reference and be like, oh, this one's on these 2 blogs, like that, you know, that means it has to be solid. And then, like you said, like, when, like, if, especially in this industry, like reach out to somebody you know from the general area. You know, I had a friend who, you know, cooks in California. he was a good chef in St. Louis. We were driving through Louisville, and I was like, where do we go eat? And he was like, 5 recommendations within like a minute.
Tight.
And then go back, cross-reference those against
we look at the menus.
The Thrillist, and
right.
like go look at the menu.
Right.
And just kind of be open to places, you know. When it comes to cities, like, you know, look at like, there is the love of getting lost in a neighborhood and just being like, this place looks good, you know, and I know it's, you know, as a cook, as a young professional, it is a gamble, because it's like, am I gonna put out my money and get something I'm not happy with?
Sure.
And you gotta take the risk, and
totally.
But we're very, very, very lucky to live in the day where you can just like pull out your phone and have the world at your fingertips. Like, I remember when I first started traveling, I didn't have a phone.
Yep.
Like, I would earbuds in, like, hit the pavement and
look for
lunch, and I will frickin' circle back 2 miles and be like do a radius of a spot and like, okay, here's this place, it looks good. I still got like, I'm not that hungry. I'm just gonna go look and see what else. Right. You know, nothing looks that good. I'm just gonna go back.
Sure.
You know.
Sure. Interesting.
Old school.
Jivian.m asks, traveling on a budget, how do you do it? And I know you were kind of perplexed as to how you were wanting to answer this, but I think so much of it you've already answered, right? Like, not subscribing to the fact that every single trip you go on needs to be this fairy tale, right? And it needs to be flexing on people or flaunting, you know what I mean? Like,
personal opinion, I'd rather it not be. Like, I'd rather, like I said earlier, like, I love restaurants. Tasting menus are cool, but I mean, you're never going to get the best sense of a place just by tasting menus. Like,
sure.
I know people who travel, and it's like, oh, well, I'm going to Oslo, so I'm hitting up Contrast and Maemo, and then we're going to go to, what was the name of the restaurant we could never pronounce that we went and ate at?
Oh, oh my God. Why can't I remember the name of that place? Yeah, one Michelin-star place. Nope, it's not gonna.
Nope.
I'm not gonna remember it. If you remember at least like a couple of ways how to pronounce it, I'll maybe remember how to say it. But anyways,
but yeah, exactly like that. Like, I remember one of the times, like, I would purposely, with travel, like, make sure I'm not bringing any suits.
Sure.
I'm bringing comfortable clothes. I'm not booking any of these crazy meals. I've gone to Paris that way and had some of the best experiences where it's like, you know, I'm just gonna go and I'm just gonna eat at bistros.
Yeah.
Just gonna eat, like, I'm gonna go buy a bottle of wine, sit by the Saint Martin Canal, just hang out. You know, I'd find that way more. You know, you can do it. You just have to be like, you got to be okay with like not flexing so hard, like, and you got to be okay with like that, and I think it takes even more research to find those hidden gems, those mom and pop places that are going to be, you know, like we got to do it in Hong Kong. Like,
yep, exactly.
How many? Yeah, we had some great meals, but we'd go over to Kowloon and just be like, let's get
spicy
lost.
Noodles.
Let's find spicy noodles.
Uh-huh.
Let's go to this, you know, ancient monastery. You know, like, there's so much to do in a city that doesn't require money.
Correct.
You know, usually.
Correct.
I think it takes a lot more research, you know.
Well, even hearing you talk about Matt traveling, and we were even talking when this question came in before we started recording about, you basically said maybe it's worth not traveling if you're on a budget. Like, maybe it's worth just like putting your head down and asking for a few more hours at work so that you can save up to then like actually go and have a great, like, guilt-free experience traveling through France, you know?
There were times that I remember one very big time that I was in Paris, and it was like that. I made the conscious choice actually not to go. I was going Paris and I was going San Sebastian, and both of them were like no fancy meals, nothing nice. I'm going to enjoy myself, but like not gonna like go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And in Paris, a very, very good friend of mine, one of my mentors, called me and said, "Hey, I have a reservation at L'Estrance. I'm never going to be able to get to eat there again.
I remember this story.
Can you meet me in an hour to dine there?" And I was like, "Crap! I'm going to show up in skinny jeans and like a denim button-up. You're showing up in a suit. This is going to look weird, but we're at L'Estrance."
Uh-huh.
And like I had a L'Estrance, and I broke my rule of not going out.
Yeah.
The next day, I was thinking like, I can't go to San Sebastian and enjoy myself the way I want. Like even on this very minor budget, like decrease my budget by what I wanted, and I canceled my trip to San Sebastian, saying I'd rather go there, and not even flex hard, but just like enjoy.
Right.
Like enjoy it with the right amount of money, the right amount of time, the right, not being stressed out the whole time. Like, oh, I can't, I canceled that trip and said, San Sebastian, I'll see you another day.
Yeah.
That was
so many people do that.
4 years ago, and haven't had a chance to go back since, which kills me.
Yeah. I mean, you have so much time left, but I think that's a funny anecdote to make, is just the idea that it's okay to make that conscious decision. And I have a follow-up question, but I also want to add the fact that, like, yes, we stayed in hotels these past 2 nights, but like we were going to crash with one of my old coworkers last night, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you can find these really unique ways to save some extra cash when you're traveling, and it's one of the reasons why, like we said early on, like that's why we travel to places where we know people, because we pretty much know.
Every time I went to Paris, I stayed at some odd places,
mm-hmm.
and what do you need there? You need a bed.
Yep.
You need a place to rest your head,
yep.
and a place to put your suitcases,
uh-huh.
and really a place to shower.
Yep.
If you can get those 3 things,
yep.
and be fine, this is amazing.
It
landscape.
Is crazy beautiful. It's just like snow-capped everything, and
it's so cool.
The best part about it is it's old snow, so the roads are clear, which is amazing for us because we were really anticipating getting hit hard with some snow coming up here. So my follow-up question to that budget travel thing was, what travel expenses are you actually willing to splurge on? Some people think that the caviar supplement is amazing. Some people need to have Wi-Fi when they're on the plane. Some people need to have the guided tour. When you get to a place, what are you actually willing to, like, what do you actually find worth it in travel to, like, this I don't want to compromise on. I'm actually willing to spend money on this.
Me personally,
mm-hmm.
I will take a cab to where I'm staying before I take public transit.
I have noticed that with you.
If I have my bags, I'm jet lagged, I'm tired, I don't want to make the mistake and end up just lost with luggage.
Yeah.
I will rather shell out to get to where I need to stay, get to home base, like establish base, and then I will walk everywhere else I go.
Yeah.
I do not care. I will take the whatever metro I can, but that initial trip is everything to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's to me it's a stress-free way to get acclimated to your surroundings, to the place, to your next couple steps.
Right.
Like if I'm taking a train into the city or a bus into the city, I'm like worried more about, am I going to make the right stop? Because I don't know what I'm looking for.
You're still deer in headlights.
I'm deer in the headlights. I'd rather be paying for somebody who knows how to get me there without me having to worry, and then I'll find my way back. That's my first thing I will shell out for.
Got it.
And that's just me. I know there's a lot of, I know you don't. So
Nope.
you're the exact opposite.
Yeah. I think if it was for me, I would have to be Wi-Fi, like some sort of internet connectivity.
Yeah, Wi-Fi absolutely imperative these days, especially
Huge.
with like that's your access to all of your information.
Yeah.
I can't carry around the books. I don't like, I had an experience a few months ago actually. I landed in London.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to be going to Norway. My flight itinerary was not how I envisioned it. I don't even know. I was supposed to be. I flew into Heathrow. I thought I was leaving to Norway from Heathrow. I was leaving from Gatwick.
That's right.
I'm jet lagged. I'm tired, and all of a sudden I need to figure out what am I going to do? I'm not going to make my flight to Gatwick. I was in a situation where I was in a city a day early. I didn't have a place to go. I didn't have Wi-Fi, and that was kind of a very eye-opening experience of like, I didn't have the funds the means to, but if I bought another flight to Norway,
there goes the budget.
Uh-huh. And so it was what do I do?
Yeah.
The first thing was Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Like get Wi-Fi, get in contact with, and like for me it was making a plan. Like it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I mean, like the friends I was supposed to stay with were at work till 6 o'clock. That I can't go take a bunch of luggage and look like and be jet lagged for 6 hours. You
Sure.
know. My first thing I did was actually call a hotel. I'd rather, I think it's so important to when making imperative decisions to have a clear head.
I think
and sleep is a part of that.
Correct. So that was going to lead me into my other thing that I'm actually willing to splurge on these days is, say there's a red-eye flight versus a 7 a.m. flight. The 7 a.m. flight, because most people want to take it, is probably going to be a little bit more expensive. And, I mean, from people probably watching how we're traveling on this trip, getting like 5 hours of sleep a night and like being a little bit unhealthy with how we're doing our sleep schedules, they probably think that that's like the way to do it. But I'm way more likely now to maybe book that more expensive ticket if it means that I get a little bit, like it alters my timeline so that my sleep doesn't get disrupted. Because I don't know, that's just how I would probably have a better experience in a city if I feel a little bit more well rested. So for me, I think that's like something I'm continuing to prioritize. But I still take red eye flights.
I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah, you're willing to
I take for 3 times in January. I took the 3 a.m. train down to Virginia, which is 6 hours, and I love it. I'd rather take the. But I think it's different too. Like my sleep schedule is beyond messed up, and a lot of that comes from
restaurants,
living and working in restaurants. I will rather work a Saturday night shift, finish shift, have 2 hours to kill, usually on a Saturday night with coworkers at a bar, with anything, and then get to the airport and be so exhausted that there's no choice but sleep.
Right.
Then, like, to me, if I'm taking a 7 a.m. flight, to me, I actually find it more torturous. I don't want to go home, sleep for 4 or 5 hours, then do this whole mess. I'd rather just get it done with. And I think that came from our time in Norway. Like,
totally.
Our flights out of Norway was always
Always.
It was a 6 a.m. flight from Bergen to Amsterdam, and then Amsterdam to JFK.
Wherever. Yeah, that's right.
And it was always after the biggest service Saturday night push we could ever have. For miles, under 60? Yeah, we're good.
And the joke was always like, will you make it to your flight? Like, will you stay out too long? Will you go to a club and go back to a nosh pill somewhere and pass out on someone's couch? Like, will you actually make it to the flight?
I didn't make it to Paris once.
Here's a question. How do you combat jet lag when you do get to your place? Do you have any tactics you'll use, or I don't know, like you just gotta live with it?
I gotta live with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're used to it.
I think it's hard, and I think honestly you're gonna be perpetually tired anyways.
Correct.
I've never, whether it was a 3 a.m. flight or a 10 a.m. flight.
Mm-hmm.
I've never landed at a different time zone and been like, I feel great.
Yeah.
I don't have a recollection
Yeah.
of that.
I guess that's true. True.
I think it's more likely that I think it's super important to fight it. That first couple hours, like if you're getting it at 8 a.m., like last till 10 p.m. Like do that much. Like
Sure.
It's gonna be so hard, but like get that first night of sleep and walk around, explore, go to that restaurant, but don't like
stay in the hotel room.
Don't stay in the hotel room, but also don't go to the bar at midnight. Like don't overdo it so that the next day you're even more tired.
Sure.
Like I had a trip where I had like a huge party leaving Napa. You remember this?
Yes.
To Paris.
Yes.
I got an hour of sleep, and then 16 hours
in
a plane, then 4 hours on a train, and 3 hours on a driving.
This when we went to Pomerol?
Yeah.
That was crazy.
And I was tired for like a week, and I gave up. And the chateau that I went to go work for, they made fun of me so much because it was like, oh, done with work, done with activities for the day, it's 4 p.m., I'm going to bed. Like, I'm so tired. And I kind of like kicked myself because it was like, I could have been doing so much more.
Yeah.
But it was also like this sleepy wine town, so it wasn't like this, like, that made it even more hard to just like stay awake because it was like, what? I mean, I finished everything for the day. We had dinner. Like, there's not like I didn't push myself enough to go explore.
Sure.
And I was so tired.
I have a couple of road trip questions because we're on the road. Chef Cliff Smith asks, worst road trip songs.
This is actually the first road trip that like I think we've listened more to podcasts and comedy
correct
than we have, and I actually find
I'm glad you brought that up.
I find that a lot more
engaging.
It's so engaging. Like actually the only times that I've had actually trouble staying awake or focusing on driving
when someone's lulling you to sleep with music,
when it wasn't engaging enough versus listening to somebody talk, like, even if it's making stupid fart jokes. It was good.
If you're traveling between two locations and you have the choice of either a train or a bus to get there, what are you more likely to pick? Train. Aisle or window seat? Window. Makes sense.
I've taken the train more than I've taken it 4 times in the past 6 months.
Wow.
Mainly to see my family in Virginia.
That's right.
And I've loved it. I'll take it way more than I can do flying. I don't know how, I don't think I could do this trip. I think that's a lot.
Well, trains are so nice because you get so much leg room and like
leg room,
stand up, walk around.
You get Wi-Fi. You can, it's not all.
The restrooms are actually like nice. Like bus restrooms are so.
I don't even want to.
No, think
about. I could never do a bus.
Night tuck. Let's talk gear for a second. If you're packing up your bag to get ready to go somewhere, what are like 2 travel essentials? Like what goes in your bag first? Aside from like passport, like the obvious.
Mophie and a Leatherman.
Got it. Is yours okay to travel on a plane, the Leatherman that you have?
No.
Okay.
Don't travel on a plane with it.
I was trying to think.
Mophie and... I mean, pack it in your
whatever bag.
Your checked bag.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
Not on a carry-away.
Mophie, for everybody listening, is like just an external battery pack.
Yeah, that'll save your life. There's so many times I've landed, the plane doesn't have a charger, or my cable is shot, and you show up in a new city and you have like 5% battery, and you're like, I don't know where I'm going. Again, we're like.
Yeah, Wi-Fi. Yeah, you can't use the Wi-Fi if you don't have a battery.
How many people can genuinely read maps?
Correct. That's so funny that you say that.
Were you a Boy Scout?
I was not a Boy Scout, but on all those road trips that I would take my family, I was the guy in the passenger seat holding the map.
Yeah.
So I got tons of experience holding the map, and I loved it. I loved all elements of navigation.
Oh yeah.
Amazing. So fun. Like, oh, we're going to take, like, even your little dashboard thing here, like, we're going to take this way, and this way it's going to be faster, and we can actually see this city if we go this way. Loved it. Here's one thing I was thinking about. In all these podcast interviews I've done, I've had a lot of time to, like, reflect on what it actually is about the industry that I enjoy. And hearing you talk about the fact that you're so hospitality focused, and it's like you're a hospitality professional. Maybe a restaurant was part of the dream early on, but especially with the way that the economics work out, would you ever open a hotel?
No.
Never open a hotel?
I would open a bed and breakfast. I would open something 3-5 rooms. That's actually, like, if I could have, I say it's a dream. It would take a lot to get there. I know it would, but I would kill for 3 to 5 room on land, big open kitchen, huge, long dining room table, family style meals, where you're there as a retreat, as a getaway, as you know, to be absorbed in nature, to be absorbed in whatever area this is. You know, I grew up in South Dakota. I got very, very lucky. My family bought a piece of land that was 336 acres of wildlife conservation. Jesus. We had 8 acres of land that we could build or farm on. We had about an acre of seasonal garden.
Wow.
And the goal my parents wanted to do was to build a bed and breakfast for hunters, because it was South Dakota, but they didn't like the idea of 4 boys running around and hunters running around. Yeah. You know, and like they didn't like the idea of people on the land.
Correct.
With open guns, and it wasn't that big enough of land. Yeah. So the idea never came to fruition. They still have that dream. I still have that dream.
Cool.
Look at that. That's so cool.
Wow. What the hell is that? It's like this big steampunk something.
It's probably a oil refinery.
Yeah.
Look at the mountains behind it.
Yeah. And the train going by.
That's wild. I'm sorry that I can't show the video watchers. A couple more questions that I ask all my guests, only because this is the first time you're coming on the show, and we're definitely going to have more episodes now that you're going to be in Seattle. It's a Saturday morning, or your first day off after a work week. You're standing in front of your kitchen. How do you make your eggs?
Over easy.
Got it.
On top of a plethora of potatoes.
Yes. Very Irish of you. You somehow get a call right after this interview that you've somehow won an all-expenses-paid trip to eat at your dream restaurant. And when you get there, there's someone you've always wanted to talk with waiting to have dinner with you. What restaurant is it, and who is that person?
Is this person alive or dead?
Dead or alive.
Dead or alive?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
And any restaurant, anywhere. Maybe it can also be open or closed.
Because I mean, I don't know if it's outside the parameters, but I mean, Ferdinand Pointe at La Pyramide 50 years ago, when the industry was really truly changing. You know, and you know, he was, I mean, they joke and talk about, like, he was one of the only guys considered for, legend has it, he was considered for 4 Michelin stars.
Wow.
You know?
Really?
No, I've read that actually a handful of places.
Crazy.
And he actually has stories about,
stay where you're at. You don't want to change lanes.
Yeah, hospitality. Like,
yeah, totally.
He had some incredible restaurants, but he had such a personality, and he took care of his guests in such a unique way as well. Like, it was pretty incredible. Like, if you get Mock Astronomy, the new one, it has some amazing stories about how he took care of people who came to his restaurant. And, you know, whether it was 2 truck drivers who pulled in and said, "Oh, we just wanted to see the great restaurant," and he's like, "Well, you've never, like," and they're like, "We're not worthy, we just want to see it." He's like, "You can't say you've seen it if you've never eaten here.
Right.
Sit your down and have a meal. And,
That's awesome.
You know, that level, like, I love that concept. And he inspired the greatest chefs of, you know, who is it? Paul Bocuse, the chef of the century.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I you know, like that level person is somebody who I want to, like, for industry's sake, I would kill to eat at his restaurant, and with the
guy himself. That's awesome. I think
but I'm a hopeless romantic for that
totally.
level of French cuisine.
I mean, your profile picture on almost all things is you shaking Paul Bocuse's hand. It's incredible.
It's a legend.
It's
like,
such a legend.
Shook hands with Frank Sinatra.
I mean, that's the same. I mean, the closest feeling that I've had to that experience that you just described is essentially what we had last night at Rye. Right? Yeah. Like, coming in from out of town, being like, the guy meets us for barbecue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Shows us around, and then we go to his restaurant. He comps the meal because he's just so freaking hospitable.
Colby and Megan are some of my favorite people in the world.
Yes.
And I've been so lucky. Like, when we first met when he was a guest chef in Norway, and we did, was it the four of us? We piled. It was the four of us in Bondswing, right?
Yep.
Or like we piled into Christopher's mom's.
That's right.
Skoda.
Yep. I remember.
We drove for a total of 8 hours that day, and like Colby is a Midwest chef. Like, I was a Midwest chef, and like he spent time at Trotter's, and he knew a lot of the same people, and just kind of connected with a guy who, like, is both outside the industry and, like, he's not in the fine dining world.
Sure.
Like, he has Blue Stem, which is a fine dining restaurant in Kansas City, but it's never gonna be on the same maps as
San Francisco,
or New York.
Yeah.
I'm not, like, the food, I'm sure, is amazing. Judging by the food we had at Rye last night,
God.
I can't even, like...
I mean, I'm about to dig into those leftovers right now.
The two meals I had at Rye were inspiring, and I can't wait to eat there again.
Well, that was my biggest standout, is not only was the food incredible, but it was like everybody came over and said hi and was asking us about our road trip. And like,
he's just super nice. I got to meet with him a year ago in California, and take care of him at Single Thread, and just like the conversations are always so good because he knows the world, and he has this world so tied down, but he's also so generous and so gracious.
Yeah.
And you see that everybody loves him. Like, we saw that last night.
Oh my God.
We like snuck into the James Beard dinner.
Colby
and Megan were having dinner there. They were guests. They weren't even cooking. And then they came into the kitchen, and like,
the entire kitchen said hi.
The entire kitchen
taking selfies.
You know, except for the guest chefs who recognized him from dinners.
Yeah.
But all the cooks like went up and were just like, "Oh my gosh, Colby's here!" Like, you just see, like, you could see that he treats everybody so well.
Yeah.
In such a great manner that, like, I'd go work for him in a heartbeat.
Totally.
Kansas City.
Yeah. My laptop's gonna die in a couple minutes, but is there anything that you want to leave anybody with, or like request anybody to? I mean, I'm gonna link up all your Instagrams and everything so people can follow along, but is there anything you want to leave people with? Travel related, food related, wine related?
Just get out there, explore, be open. You know, I know I'll say this and try not to like bring too many tears, but like, I like, watch Bourdain.
Yep.
Watch Bourdain and just like take notes. Like, if you can't travel, like if you have to put off and wait for that trip, like, go watch Bourdain. And if you want to know how to travel, watch, like, see him. He was the first guy before I had frickin' like the internet. Like, when I was going to Lyon and Paris or New York and 8 years ago, like 7-8 years ago now, like, I would watch whatever episode of whatever city he's going to, and I would be like, okay, like,
That's the plan.
That's the like not even just that's the plan, but like get the mentality of what.
Oh, sure.
That is basic research into. That is actually the most enjoyable research. Like, you'll get more from his TV show than the, Oakland for Dummies.
Totally.
book.
Totally.
Go watch that. Go visit some of his places. That was the first couple times I went to Paris by myself. I hit up a Pied de Cochon. I went to Le Comptoir de Cochon. I went to and just get lost and just I think it also Tony intends just a comfort in being lost. And I think if there's anything you want to take away from travel, like just look at what he did and just like reflect and know that like that is how you do it. Like I will still take inspiration always from how to do it from him.
Contextual travel. I love it. And there you have it. That is the end of the interview. I hope you enjoyed spending time in the car with us. I've got a few things for you to do next if you're feeling the travel bug. Myself and this episode's sponsor, Capital One, would love to hear about how you travel with purpose. Please leave me some of your stories down low in the comments or even tweet at me with the hashtag meaningful moment so the Purpose Project folks and myself can find you and your stories. I would love to retweet some fun stories that you've got because I know that everybody's travel experiences are different. Also linked up in the show notes is a fun piece that I did for Capital One's newsroom where I share my experience exploring Kansas City for the first time. That was in collaboration with a couple of the other awesome figureheads of travel that are part of their Purpose Project. Thank you so much again to the awesome team at Capital One for helping support trips like this. If you've got any questions for John, he is of course linked up down below as well. Until the next episode, please roll the outro. We did it. You're in outro land now. Thank you so much. I appreciate your ears more than you'll ever know. Hey, by making it to the end, you're the type of person that I want to speak to directly. This little production is constantly growing. If you enjoyed this episode, if you like what I'm trying to do with this show and want to make sure more people can find us, a free way to help out that takes less than 3 minutes is to leave the Emulsion a great review on iTunes. If you didn't enjoy this show, please also leave a review. I'm happy to take any constructive feedback you've got. If you want to learn more about supporting this show with your hard-earned cash, patreon.com/Justin Khanna is the place to do that. I've got tiers starting at just $1 per month. Let's say you just like being involved through suggesting stories to be covered or asking questions to my interview guests. You can stay up to date by following along on Twitter or Instagram. That is linked up in the description for your convenience or always available on justinkhanna.com. If you're on YouTube and listening, you can take this show on the go because this is available on all podcast platforms, including Spotify. And if you prefer video versions of things like my interview shows or the shorter intermezzo episodes and you're listening audio only, please check out my YouTube channel to see more of that. Now's normally where I'd say my name is Justin Khanna and I hope you have a good one, but you've probably got another podcast episode to listen to. So I'm just going to get out of the way here. Excuse me. Pardon me.